All right, welcome back to the next daily drawing. Today we're going to be drawing a horse, which if you want to, you could turn it into like a unicorn or a Pegasus or something if you want. But yeah, so let's get started. We're going to first start off with the body. So if you'll notice, the body is kind of like that bean shape that we've seen in some other animals before. So it has a really big torso, and the back one is also a little bit big as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to start with a circle shape, and then I'm going to draw another one that's a little bit further back and kind of at a diagonal from the first one. That way this is going to be my ribs, and this is going to be the kind of like the thighs of the backside. So then what I would do after that is I'm going to connect the top right here. I'm going to do a parenthesis or a smile and connect it to the bottom of this one. That's going to give us that roundness of the belly. And then the back is also rounded in this particular position. Now, this horse is kind of rearing up, so that's why the back is bent. If you're looking at it from a slightly other point of view, you might see it in a little bit of different way. But this one right here, I'm just going to connect the spine to the back of the hips, just by drawing kind of like a little curve. And very important, making sure that that looks very round and soft. You don't want that to look super sharp and pointy unless that's the style you're going. Unless that's the style you're going for. All right. So next what I would do is I'm going to take the neck area. So notice the neck area is just an extension. If I go like this, it's just an extension of the belly going up into the head area. So if it's helpful, you can draw the neck first and then the head, or you can draw the head first. I'm personally going to go ahead and draw the neck and then add the head, just because horses' heads are kind of like a little bit of an awkward shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right here where I stopped on that belly, and I'm just going to continue this up in a parenthesis like this, just extending that curve. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the back right here, and then I'm just going to continue that curve up as well until I get across from it like this. So it's just the same parenthesis here and here. And notice that this one started at the top of the torso, and this just starts at the back of the torso. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend this forward. This is going to be where it's going to start turning into my head. So this is going to cause a wonk. So we go parenthesis in this direction, rotate it in this direction, then I'm just going to cap it off with a circle like this. So it's kind of like a weird curvy line thing with a circle at the end of it. This is almost a teardrop shape that has a little bit of a tail to it. All right, so now that I have my neck, and be sure to make sure you're checking the size that you're doing. So if I measure the size of this neck, it shouldn't be any bigger than this belly. So if you're making your neck a little too high up, feel free to shrink it just by moving it down a little bit. So kind of like check your body proportions. You don't want to have like a freakishly long neck like this with a tiny, tiny body, because that might make it look more like a giraffe and less like a horse. So really make sure you're kind of measuring as you're going. So, and you can always also extend the body if you don't want to shrink the head and the neck. So that's entirely up to you. Just make sure you're kind of eyeballing it or measuring it as you go. So I think this looks all right. I might have to extend this out a little bit later like this, but I'll come back to that whenever I get to the legs. But for right now, I think this is all right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the head first. I'll come back to the body. Is I'm going to first figure out the angle of the head. So if this right here is the kind of like the cranium area of the skull, we have a very nice diagonal line that we can kind of see here that goes from the top of the head, diagonal line down until we get to the tip of the nose. And then it just kind of like diagonal lines back up into where it hits the jaw right here. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to first kind of draw like a little circle-y shape where I want the end of my nose. That way it makes it easier for me to kind of like do that whole wraparound thing. So after I draw like a little circle, and I want to make sure that it's a little bit of a distance from here. I don't want to go like really far out because that's a little too excessive, and I also don't want to make it too close unless I'm going for like a colt or a younger type horse. All right, so now that I have my kind of area that I know I want my nose to go, I'm just going to connect the top of this circle. And also one more thing to note, this is small. Notice how small it is compared to the head. Don't make this very, very big, because if you'll notice, the top of their muzzles are very small compared to the size of their head. All right, so anyway, going back to the top of the head, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the top of the head right here. Then I'm just going to slowly curve it down to where it touches right here. So it's almost like a diagonal line, but we don't want to make it like perfectly straight. I don't want to have just like a straight line. Notice that I kind of slowly curve that down so it meets more naturally. All right, after I have that connected, then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect the bottom of the head to where that jaw is right there, like this. So now I have my, this is going to be my cranium. This is going to be my forehead. This is going to be the bottom jaw right here. And then we're not quite done yet though, because there's something very distinctive that we're missing, is we're missing that kind of bottom lip. Horses have a bump on the bottom of their lip. So what I would do is I just add like a little bit of a smile down here for that little bump on the bottom of a horse's jaw. All right. After I have all of this established, and this is just a smiley face, by the way. After I have all this established, I can erase those circles on the inside. However, keep this part of the circle because that's going to represent the jawline, which they have a very distinctive jawline, which, as with other things, you can't erase like the top of the jawline, but keep that bottom of the jawline, especially right here, because that's very distinctive of a horse's anatomy, is they have very strong jaws. And if you want to exaggerate it and make it stick out a little bit more, feel free to. I really want to make sure that the jaw looks like it's overlapping the neck. So here I've lowered it down just a little bit so that it looks more like the jaw is in front of the neck rather than like right there on the edge of the neck. So kind of alter that until you feel like you have a good looking jaw. If it's not standing out enough, just exaggerate a little bit. All right, so and I can also erase the top of this line right here. So this is right here is going to be where the mouth is, and then I can kind of erase that top part where that lower jaw is kind of meeting into the head, but do keep this part because that is where the mouth is. If you want the mouth open, all you have to do is just draw like another little smile there, and that can kind of lower that jaw to make the mouth open a little bit. And of course you can make them smile. You don't have to have them all frowny and stuff. So do whatever expression that you would like to do on your horse. All right, so now I'm going to move on. I'm going to go ahead and do the nose while I'm down here. So something very distinctive about the nose, if you'll notice the lip kind of sticks out a little bit, especially if they're like neighing or whatever. So to get that illusion, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kind of make this tip of the nose a little bit more of a diagonal. So right here we have a very nice soft curve, which if you're going for more of a cartoony aesthetic, you can leave it curvy. But if you're going for something a little bit more realistic, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start right here on that line that I made for the mouth. I'm going to make it curve in a parenthesis like this. So I make a little bit of a parenthesis, and then it's just going to make this a diagonal line instead of a perfectly rounded line. So it's kind of like you're drawing a greater than or less than sign, but that greater than or less than sign is more curvy rather than pointy. So we're going to do that on the tip of the nose right here, and then just erase any of the excess that you don't need. And that'll give us a little bit more of a kind of like the tip of a horse's muzzle. All right. Now on their actual nose itself, it's just a little bit of a curve that's a parenthesis facing inwards. So once we get the muzzle shape worked out, I'm just going to draw like a little bit of a parenthesis like this, or like a backwards C. And then I can just kind of like lightly shade it in if you're choosing to shade it. If you're coloring it, you can color it something different, or you can just leave it as a C, and that's fine as well. Now I don't see the other nose because this is a horse in profile, so I only see half of the head, so I don't have to worry about the other nose. All right, so here we have the nose and the mouth is done. Feel free to add more to the mouth if you want to, but I'm going to keep mine pretty simple because I don't want to make it look too complicated. All right, we've got the jaw and we've got the muzzle. Something that we do have a little bit, if you can kind of see, there's a slight indentation right here, right where the eyes are going to go. So right here across from the jaw is where we're going to have that brow indent. So across from the jaw, what I would suggest doing is make it to where the forehead goes up just a tiny bit like this. Notice that all I'm doing is I'm just taking that line, I'm extending it up a tiny bit, and then I'm just following it back to the head like this. That's going to give us a little bit more of a forehead, and that's like an extra detail that if you don't want to do that, you don't have to, but that's just going to help make it feel a little bit more realistic. All right, so the location of the ears is going to be around from the jaw. So if this is the jaw area right here, if I continue it up, it's the top of the head right there. So if this is my jaw area, if I go up, this right here is going to be where those ears are going to come out of. So if I continue that jaw up like this, that's where the ear is going to come out of. So to draw the ears, what I would suggest doing is start with kind of a loose diagonal line, meaning don't make it perfectly straight. If it's a little wiggly, that's actually even better. So kind of a loose diagonal line. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a very tiny frown at the top. And then I'm just going to bring it back down inside the head. Very important that it goes inside the head. That way it feels like it's on the side of the head and not the top of the head. Because they're not rabbits. They got a little bit more of a indentation for where their ears are. They're not like directly on the top. All right, now in this particular picture, I do see the other ear. It's slightly off to the side. It's a little bit thinner. So to draw the other ear, I'm going to actually start on this edge of the ear. I'm going to do that slight diagonal line. That's not perfect. It might be a little bit curvy. Do a tiny frown, and then we're just going to bring it back to the head. So this is the ear on the other side. All right. Now that I have my nose, mouth, and ears, now I can figure out where my eye is going to go. So if I go across from the ear, and I'm actually going to try to aim at this indentation that we did here before. If you don't have that indentation, then just kind of across from the corner of the jaw. this is the area where I want to have my eye. Or if you want to, you can line up how we kind of usually do, line up the top of the nose and the ear, and then this is going to be where you're going to have your eyes about this area. So corner of the nose to the ear, or if you go across from the like eye thing to the ear, that can also be a way to find it. So it's going to be located in about this area right here. So the shape of a horse's eye when you're seeing it from side view is a little different from front view. From side view, it's actually going to look kind of like a greater than or less than sign, like this, which seems weird. But you're going to draw a greater than or less than sign first, and then you're going to add a parenthesis on the front of it to make it a little bit more rounded. And horses actually have really small eyes. I'm going to draw mine a little bit bigger just to give it a little bit more emotion. But they have really small eyes compared to the size of their head. You can add like eyelashes coming out of it if you want, or you can just leave it simple and smooth. I would suggest adding like a little highlight and filling in the rest. Or if you're choosing to color it, you can do that as well. Now they do have a lot of like folds and stuff around it, but I'm not going to do that yet because that's kind of more of a realistic detail. Once you have that, if you did draw a line to help you figure out the location of the eye, you can erase that extra part. All right, so now we have our head. Now we can move on to the rest of the body. We're going to come back and we're going to do the mane last. So we're going to go ahead and do the legs and stuff first. All right, so if I zoom out here, I can kind of see the rest of the body. All right, so I'm going to move this down a bit. All right, so now that I'm finished with my head, this right here is what I'm going to focus on next. So this is the torso area. So if I'm looking at this torso, I see that this right here is the front of the shoulder. This is the back of the shoulder. And then for the leg, it makes kind of like a greater than or less than sign with another kind of diagonal as well. They've got really weird legs. So the first thing I'm going to do is right here on the shoulder, I'm going to draw a big parenthesis. This is going to be the muscle of the shoulder. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start right here. I'm going to go forward like this, kind of like making sure it's not perfectly pointy. I want to make it a little bit rounded. Go forward just a little bit. And then once you get to a part where you think that you're ready for this knee right here, you're going to frown it down like this. And then once you get to where you think you're ready for the other ankle part, which by the way, their legs are pretty, their legs are pretty long. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about that. But this would go in a slight diagonal like this. So it's going to be parenthesis, diagonal, diagonal, diagonal. So this just kind of makes a greater than or less than sign, and this also makes kind of a greater than or less than sign. So the length of the leg, if you kind of measure the length of the leg, it should be bent up like this. Now, not straight. When the leg is straight, it should be the same length as the body, but because this leg is all bent up, if I measure it and then compare it to the head, my leg should be at least the same length as the head coming out from the body. So it looks like I got it pretty close to the length that I need to have it. So really make sure that you're kind of measuring it as you're going. All right. So to finish this foot off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a parenthesis or a smiley face, if you want to call it that. And then this is going to be the bottom of the hoof. I'm going to go up just a tiny bit with a line. And then I'm going to do another parenthesis or smiley face. I'm making it a little wider right here and a little smaller right here to get that kind of diagonal look for the horse's hoof. All right. Now that I have that, I'm going to do a very tiny parenthesis going in. This is going to make the kind of wrist area of the horse. And then after I do that, then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow this back up until it almost touches the other leg, but not quite. And then I'm going to start a little bit down, follow it back up. My goal is to reach the belly. Once I hit the belly or get close to the belly, that's where I'm going to curve it up for the ankle or elbow. I don't know. Yeah, that thing. And then I'm just going to add a parenthesis right here. So this is going to help kind of define the different parts of the foot and the leg. So here we have shoulder, this goes out, this is elbow, this is wrist, and this is toe or foot, okay? All right, once you have all of this established, then you can just erase the inside of the belly, and you can erase the top of the shoulder. I would suggest leave the back of the shoulder and the front of the shoulder, though. That way we don't get lost on it. All right, so for this, sorry, I have hiccups. So for this other leg, it's a little bit more stretched out. If I measure the length of it, and then compare it to another part, it's about the same length as the neck is. So I'm going to go out, I'm going to put a marker dot so I make sure that I draw it far enough out. You don't have to be that accurate. That's just for me personally. I like to be accurate. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw the shoulder. The shoulder is actually sticking out from the neck, and it makes kind of like a curvy, like smiley face or parenthesis. So I'm going to start right here across from this other shoulder. I'm going to do a slight smile or parenthesis like this, just to give it that really good muscle bump. And then afterwards, I'm going to start somewhere a little bit in the top-ish area, and I'm going to draw a diagonal line. Just a little bit of a distance. Should be about the same distance as you drew here, if not a little bit longer or shorter. So pretty close to that same distance. And then you're going to make it go out a little bit flatter. Oops, I have a little bit of extra elbow thing in there. All right, so diagonal line, flat line, and then whenever you get ready for the end foot, all you're gonna do is you're just gonna switch that direction a little bit. So diagonal line, flat line, slight diagonal line down, and I got pretty close to my marker dot, so that means that I did pretty good. All right, so from here to draw the rest of the foot, I'm gonna draw a flat diagonal line, drawing a backwards parenthesis, like this. And of course, if you wanna go ahead and draw that hoof, it's just gonna be a kind of a curvy diagonal line going down, so that this right here would be my hoof. After I have my foot shape, then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna draw a kind of a smiley shape. Keep it pretty close. It's almost a parallel line to this. And then I'm just gonna bring that back down to touch the bottom of that shoulder area. So now I have my two hoof horse thing, foot things, legs? Yes, legs sticking out. All right, so I'm actually gonna leave this muscle grouping right here because that's actually pretty accurate. They have really big bulky muscles, so I'm not gonna erase any of that. If you wanted to erase this bottom half of this thing right here so that it connects to the leg more, you can, but that's optional. All right, so back legs, let's go. All right, so if you, at this point, if you're looking at it and you feel like the back legs or the back of the body looks way too small, feel free to make it get a little bit bulkier. So that's kind of your call. If you feel like you need to make it bigger, make it bigger. If you feel like you have it fine and you like the size of it, keep it, okay? So mine, I didn't have to really change too much, so I'm just gonna leave it like this. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at the back thigh. The back thigh is actually really massive for a horse. It goes all the way here and down, so that's a really large area to have the thigh. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna use the circle that I already have drawn here, and I'm just gonna extend this down a little bit in kind of a teardrop shape, sort of, like this. Just to extend that thigh muscle a little bit more. And then I can erase that inside. So that's just gonna help us get a little bit more muscle going down to help us draw the rest of the leg. All right, so now the length of the leg, if I measure it, let me zoom out a little bit. If I measure the length of the leg and go sideways, it should be about the length of the body here. So make sure that you're making that leg long enough. And if you run out of space, it's okay to go off the paper. I'm like super close, but I'm still gonna be able to fit it. So if you accidentally go off the paper, just let it, or if you want to, bend the leg up a little bit more. All right, so for the back leg, the first thing I would suggest doing is go to kind of the bottom of the teardrop area, and then we're gonna draw a parenthesis like this. So a backwards parenthesis. This is gonna give us our ankle. After we get the back of the parenthesis for the ankle, then we're going to draw a diagonal line-ish. It can go pretty straight if you want to, though. So ankle, slight diagonal line. And then once you get close to your marker dot, if you've drawn one, then all you're going to do is you're going to do a very tiny parenthesis going down, or a frowny face, like this. And then after you have it going down, make sure you extend a little bit past it. It shouldn't be even with this. It should be a little bit lower. And then we're just going to draw a flat part. This is going to be the hoof. And then once you get however long that you're wanting the hoof to be, you're just going to do a frown going up until it gets across from that little bump that we have drawn here. So this right here is going to be our shape. So just a frowny line, flat line, parenthesis shape. And then of course, as always, we can draw that little curve. This is going to be the hoof right here. Now notice that I did not touch this. Make sure you leave a gap. Once you have that gap drawn, then our goal is to connect this to the thigh. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start back up here with the thigh. I'm going to curve it until it gets close to the ankle, and then I'm going to curve it down so that it connects like this. So that'll get us that kind of dramatic looking back leg of the horse's foot, okay? Once you get done with that, you can erase the inside of the leg here, and you can erase the top of the thigh area, but do still leave a little bit of that thigh area right here. And which, by the way, this is kind of a thinner horse. If you want a kind of chubbier horse, feel free to exaggerate the belly a little bit if you want to, but that's kind of up to you how like thick or thin that you want your horse. I'm feeling like I want a little bit of a chubbier horse, so there we go. That gives a little bit more roundness and makes it a little bit cute too. All right, so last leg that I gotta do is this one's gonna be pretty simple because I don't see as much of it. All I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw a slight parenthesis like this, and notice that it's kind of even-ish with this back ankle. After I do a slight parenthesis, I'm just gonna do a diagonal line, almost like a greater than less than sign. Making sure that this part's not too pointy. I want to keep it kind of rounded. So if it's super pointy, just kind of draw a little parenthesis and kind of round that down. Once I get to the length that it should be about the same length as this, if not a little bit shorter. So make sure you're kind of measuring back on your previous legs. Then I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a frowny face like this. This will be where the hoof is. After I get the frowny face, I'm going to do a slight flat line with a little parenthesis. This is going to be my hoof. So I can draw that little diagonal line shaded in if you want. And then I'm going to do is just draw a little bit of a parenthesis going back until I get across from the ankle. And then I'm just going to do a curve going up. So parenthesis, flat line, parenthesis, making it almost kind of looks like a greater than less than sign here. Make sure you don't make it look too thin, otherwise it might look a little bit awkward, so be careful not to go too thin on that. All right, so I kind of like it, yeah. So I think the proportions might be a little bit off on my drawing, but because we're just practicing, that's okay. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the mane. So this one you can do in a lot of different ways, the mane and the tail, of course. So I'm gonna do mine using kind of like flowy lines. If you wanna do yours using more poofy, curly lines, that's fine. So that's kind of up to you how you wanna do the mane. So I'm gonna stick with kind of what we have in the picture here. It's kind of flowing off to the side. You can draw yours in any direction you want though. So my suggestion when drawing something like this is draw the overall shape and then come back and add some more details into it. So I noticed that the mane's gonna start right here kind of on the back of this ear. I'm gonna start with kind of like a frown. I'm gonna add wonky lines. So all I'm doing is I'm gonna add like a frown, smile, like this, just add a little bit of a wonk. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add like little points to the tip of the main area. This is looking like a Pokemon. All right, so I don't want to go too crazy, which I've probably already gone too crazy. So all I'm doing is I'm just adding like little spiky points. You can add little curly points if you want to. It can be thinner, it can be thicker. That's kind of up to you. You can have some that are a little bit shorter up here. That's kind of all up to you what you want to do on your drawing. Now that I have the basic shape that I want for my mane, which by the way, to do these shapes, all I'm doing is I'm just doing like smiles, or I'm doing like frowns, or you can do like wiggles and then going back with wiggles. If you did like the drawing the octopus with me or drawing like the jellyfish, it's essentially what we're doing for what we did with those legs, as we're just drawing kind of similar wiggles. All right, after I have that all connected back together, then what I can do is I can go back and touch on the mane, or like touch on the back of the neck, and I can just add that and connect it to one of those spikes like this. And then I can even add some additional lines on the inside. So what I'm doing is I'm just drawing kind of like parallel lines of sorts, and then every now and then I'm just letting it touch back onto a different area. And it is okay to have some parts go into the neck too. That'll just make it look like it's kind of like flowing in the wind, sort of. So you don't have to copy the exact same thing I'm doing, by the way. You kind of do whatever you want to for your mane. You can even have some parts going up to the front, because their mane can go up to the front depending on how the wind's going. So you can have some go up to the front. You can have it all go out to the back if you want to. It's entirely up to you how you want that mane. But what I'm doing is I'm just starting on a line and going until I hit a line. And then as soon as I hit a line, I stop. That way it gives it a little bit more of a flow to it, because I don't want it to look like a big scribbly mess. I would rather have shapes than like scribbles. So just make sure that whenever you start on a line that you stop whenever you touch another line. And then that'll give you kind of the texture of a hair, or like the mane texture. So here, I'm going to leave that. I'm pretty satisfied with the look of that. So I'm going to go ahead and do the tail. So for the tail, it's just an extension of the spine. So I'm going to start right here because that's about where the spine would end. Then I'm just going to draw kind of like a wiggly shape, however long I want my tail. And of course, this is art. If you want like a fantastical tail that's like a lot longer, feel free to make it a lot longer. So here I'm just doing those same techniques that I did on the hair. I'm just adding those wiggly lines, kind of filling it in. And then as soon as I stop, or as soon as I touch another line, I'm just going to stop. That way it doesn't get too scribbly, just like this. So what I'm going to do is just drawing a bunch of parentheses, some frowny faces, smiley faces. You can even, if you want to add some more spiky floofs, just go on the edge, add a spiky floof. So just make sure that wherever you start, just, or if you are starting something new, just make sure that you start and that you touch back on something else. And be careful, because here I have gone a little too far, but that's okay. So you can't have a lot of fun with that and then add a little whole lot of exaggeration. All right, so if you would like to have it done at this point, you can call this done. I think that looks pretty cute. I have gone a little excessive with my mane and tail, but that's okay because it's super fun to draw. If you want to make this into more of a unicorn, all you have to do is just pick a spot on the forehead, draw a diagonal line up, and then just draw, starting at the point, it should be thin at the point, and then slowly get thicker as it gets back down. And then there's a little horn on there. So a lot of unicorn horns have like those spirals going up, so all you have to do is just draw a bunch of smiley faces. And then ta-da, we have a unicorn. All right, so if you are going for a slightly more realistic look, there are a couple things that you could do. You could add some more details around the face, like adding the kind of like lumpy shapes that go around the eyes. So all I'm doing here is I'm just adding kind of like the eyebrow area, and then adding this little diagonal line that goes close from the eye to the nose. And then of course, like some muscle lines, like the neckline here. We can add a little bit of a shoulder indentation here. So there's really not much that we really need to do for realism. Of course, there's a lot that we can do for like the leg areas, like doing like the nodes and the knobs, making it not look as perfect and as straight, because they have a lot of like, I I don't know what you call it. Are they just called knobs for the knees and stuff? Kind of like how if we drew the llama together, if you remember on that one, we did like knobs for knees and stuff. So that's something that you can do, is go back and do that to make it look a little bit more realistic. So adding a little bit more of those smaller details is something that you can do to help make it look a little bit more realistic. But especially with the style I drew here, it looks kind of more like a, what do you call this, carousel? I don't know. The thing that goes like around, merry-go-round things? I don't know. But yeah, so since it looks kind of like that, I'm not going to go too realistic with mine because I kind of like that merry-go-round aesthetic. So, yeah, so I'm going to leave it like this, and I'm going to add a little bit of shading. But if you guys want to do something more realistic, of course, as always, my suggestion, just look for the details that you're missing. Look and see if there's anything that is small that you're like, oh, hey, I didn't draw that. And if you add that, the more details you add, without going too crazy, of course, the more realistic your horse is going to start looking like. So if you look really closely at the like hooves, or if you look really closely at the face, and if you see anything that you're like, I don't have that on my drawing, I think if I add that, that would benefit it greatly, then that can really make your drawing stand out and shine, and make it look a little bit more realistic. But of course, there's nothing wrong with drawing cartoony things. It's actually one of my favorite things to draw, is in more of a cartoony style, which is why a lot of my drawings look a little bit more on the cartoony side rather than the super realistic side, is because that's just what I personally love to draw. So nothing wrong with drawing cartoony things. All right, so now that I've got my little guy shaded, I think he's done. So I think turned out pretty cute. I hope you guys had fun, and this one was kind of a longer one. Horses are just very complicated, especially with their legs and stuff. But if you followed along, I would love to see what your guys' results are. All right, have a good day. Bye.